Welcome to the Rig Doctor podcast, where I'm giving out remedies to soothe your ailing tone and fix your sick pedalboard. I'm your host, Mason Marangella, aka the Rig Doctor, and I've been building rigs for over a decade for many of the industry's top pros, and now I'm giving away all of my secrets to DIYers just like you. I'm giving away all my tricks, tips, resources, and easy hacks that I've learned over the years so you too can build a rig just like a pro. And in the spirit of that, I'm going to bring on another great professional and my good buddy, Joey Landreth. I haven't spoken to Joey recently, especially since during COVID, a lot has changed in his life. He's now a father, and he's been taking the last year off as a result of the pandemic, but is getting back into making some great music and was reacquainted recently with some of our devices and pedals that we had sent him a couple of years ago, and has really become a new fan of the dynamic distortion, which is one of our early pedals that we released about 2016 or so, and has been reintroduced to that and is really loving it. We got to texting again. I asked him to come on the show and he agreed, and we had a great conversation about gear, about pedals, about amplifiers and guitars, and kind of talking about the core essence of his tone, maybe how you could go about getting some of that as well, getting, maybe some cheaper devices, and he gives some examples of that. And also just his overall approach and kind of what he finds works for him. Lots of great gems in this. I can't wait for you to hear it. And before we start, just a quick note, if you want to help support the podcast, you can do so by sharing it on social media or subscribing to the podcast on whatever platform it is. You can also follow us on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube. These are all easy, free ways that you could help support. And if you want to financially support us, we have a couple of different options. You can firstly buy a Vertex pedal from an authorized dealer or from our website, or you can head over to therigdr.com, and we have all the pedalboard accessories and pedal boards and zip ties and tie-down mounts and Velcro. All that stuff is available there. Also, we have Patreon memberships starting as low as $4.99 a month, and this gives you exclusive access to early deals and discounts on new Vertex products as well as existing Vertex products, free shipping, and kind of all cool things like that, kind of little perks of being a member. And also you get a weekly live stream with us. It's a private Q&A that's for members only, so definitely check that out. Or again, we have that same type of deal, like a paid subscription service, which pretty much mirrors Patreon. But for some people that don't want to enroll in Patreon, we have a version of that on therigdr.com. And if you can't afford any of these and you want to be involved, we actually offer a free version of kind of our basic membership. And all you need to do is email us at info@therigdr.com, and we grant 100% of those requests for a free membership, no questions asked. So feel free to do it. Don't be bashful. We would love to have you a part of our community. It's all anonymous, so nobody has any idea which people have free accounts and which don't. So please join us. We'd love to have you. We invite you to send us an email and request that free account if you need it. I also want to thank all of our sponsors, our friends at Blue Microphones, for providing microphones for the podcast, as well as our friends over at True Tone, Diodario, and also our own company, my company, Vertex, because we couldn't do this without Vertex footing the bill for at least some of the basics. So thank you to all those sponsors. And without further ado, I bring you my good buddy, Joey Landreth. So, Joey, today I really want to focus in on like pedals and gear and tones and stuff like that. And to me, although, most of my pedals or none of my pedals, I should say, have really made the Landreth cut, but I'm happy to still dive into this nonetheless because I really like the tones that you get. I feel like they're really amazing. The slide tones are great. And I kind of think of you amongst, kind of the high watermark of guitar players that are getting amazing sounds that have, kind of come to kind of be part of the lexicon of some of kind of your age group guitar players and which is my age group guitar players, coincidentally. And so I really want to hear about the stuff that you use, kind of your picks, how you might go about sort of, kind of creating the Landreth signature tone, and kind of maybe just go through the major food groups of pedals, of amplifiers and how you get them, and then maybe like alternatives, like let's say, somebody can't afford a 2-rock or something like that. Like, what would you suggest to somebody who kind of wants to go after your thing or attempt to go after your thing? and how you might kind of synthesize that down a price point for somebody that wants to get something that maybe is a little more pedestrian, or they could get at a Guitar Center or a Long and McQuaid or something like that.
Nice Canadian reference.
Yeah.
Love that.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to start with kind of just like guitars. Like, what are, you kind of have that like P90, like Les Paul style thing. What are kind of like the essential, Joey Landreth instruments that need to be in place?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm a bit like, I'm a bit of an like when it comes to guitars, I'm a bit of more of an emotional kind of connection guy. Whereas, when I first kind of came onto the scene, I was playing some variety of a Strat. Like I think when I first sort of had my first sort of internet appearance, I was playing this Cootercaster kind of thing, and
your first internet appearance.
Yeah. It was Anderton's TV in the UK, and that guitar kind of sort of earmarked a point in time for me as a player and as an artist and stuff, and I think a lot of people will identify with an instrument, whether it's like, my heroes played Strats or Tellys or Les Pauls or 335s or whatever. And for me, it's always been like when I pick up an instrument and it gives me something back. So I kind of flip flop back and forth, and it's like sometimes it's a Strat with a super skinny neck, and sometimes it's a Les Paul with a super fat neck, and sometimes it's single coil, sometimes it's humbuckers, and it's really not like I just sort of connect with the individual instrument kind of, and when I got this gold top a couple of years ago back in 2018, and there's a bit of a story behind that guitar, but I'll save that for another time. But basically the punchline was the guy who built it, first of all, he finished it on my birthday, which was super cool. He had no idea. It was like, hey, guitar's done. I was like, wicked, it's my birthday today. And he lives in Edmonton, which is it's like a 17-hour drive from where I live. And we were doing a big hometown show. We were playing with the local symphony, and it was like days out from that show. And I said, hey man, I literally have one comp ticket left. The rest of the show is pretty much sold out, and I have enough points to fly you in. Would you? Because he didn't want to put the guitar in the mail.
Right.
So we were going to wait until I passed through Edmonton, and I said, I'm dying to meet this instrument. The build up for it had been over a year. So I was like, if I fly you into the gig, would you bring the guitar with you? And he agreed. And it was this like hilarious moment where like he gets in, his flight was delayed, and he gets in the cab, and cabs in from the airport and gets to the concert hall and brings the guitar. And I literally like, hey man, nice to see you. Grab the guitar, put it on, and sound check. And I pretty much haven't put it down since. And it was not necessarily because like I love gold top Les Pauls or because I love P90s. It was just I connected with that guitar, and I have not picked anything up that makes me want to put it down yet. And that's kind of sort of how I choose an instrument. And I have a Collings I-35, which is also very near and dear to my heart. And it was kind of the same way. I had been playing a couple of different Strats. I had a Sir Strat or Classic S that I was playing that's gorgeous, that I still have and still love.
That's kind of like the surf green one with like the tortoise guard, or
yeah, and that was kind of my main axe for a while. And then I got this Collings I-35, and I just picked it up, and it was like it kind of chooses itself. It's not like I'm over this guitar now. It's just when I go to put a guitar in the case, and if I'm about to walk through the door and go, I gotta grab that other one. That's kind of how I know that the throne has been usurped, and
right.
and I've yet to pick something up that has done that with the gold top. So that's sort of and I don't know what it is. Like it's an intangible thing for me. I pick it up and I get something back that's exciting, and that's kind of how I pick pedals as well. It's like I just step on something, and if it gives me something back that I wasn't expecting, that's usually what keeps something on my board. And I mean, I'm pretty much a creature of habit when it comes to circuits that I really like. But different varieties have just sort of sparked joy or piqued interest, however you want to say it. So, but yeah, that's kind of my go-to for guitars, and that's kind of my process for what I play. But in my guitar locker that I travel with, I've always got something with. I've got the gold top. I've got something with humbuckers. I've got usually a hollow body, and in this particular case, it's the Collings I-35. So that's the humbucker guitar and the hollow body, and then an acoustic for whenever we have to do acoustic stuff. And then usually there's one other guitar just for fun. And so the other guitar that sort of lives in my locker most of the time is a Josh Williams Mockingbird, which is like a full body 335 style thing. Mm-hmm. And mine has Firebird pickups in it. And I love that guitar. I record with that guitar. I don't often play it live because the output is so different than everything else that it's just, and I don't like in my rig. I tried to travel with a clean boost that was dedicated just to that guitar to bring the volume up. But when I would step on the clean boost, I just wanted to leave it on the entire time. So then I would pick up the other guitar and it's still too quiet, so it's just like, well, okay, I'll put another clean boost on that's just for that guitar. And then I know that I'm just going to wind up leaving that on too. So that guitar doesn't get as much love live, just mainly for that reason. But I use it like I record with it all the time. It records so well. So those are kind of my main, the main go-tos: the gold top, the I-35, the Josh Williams, and then also that surf green, Sir. Yeah. Those are my go-to guitars.
It seems like such a risk for me, like as a collector of instruments, to like buy something sight unseen like that, and that you actually connect with it. It's sort of like an arranged marriage or something.
Yeah, totally. The mail order bride or husband. Yeah, it's just like, boy, I hope this works. Totally. But the cool thing is that like I had played the guy who made my gold top, Alex Sorokin. I had played a number of his builds before, and the thing that really impressed me about his builds is that I didn't notice that it wasn't an actual vintage Gibson. Like I picked one up at a store in Edmonton when I was passing through, and like had an afternoon off and was going to try and find some pedals, which I often do. And I said, what's the coolest guitar? What's the shop favorite? What do you guys like the most? They said, oh, this Les Paul Jr. And I picked it up and played it. And having played a number of old Juniors myself and old Gibsons, I looked at the shop owner and said, what year is this? And he was like, 2017. And then I looked at the headstock, and that's when I realized, okay, oh, this is not an old Gibson. And it just blew me away. And so I managed to convince Alex to build me something. And so it wasn't completely sight unseen, but it definitely was like, obviously every guitar's, it's organic and an individual, so you don't know what you're going to get. And when I picked up that guitar and plugged it in, it was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other ones, presumably you'd found those somewhere, or were those also ordered and built for you?
Yeah, those were also ordered and built. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just not like a, I don't know. I mean, I guess the way I describe my relationship with my instruments may seem like I'm kind of precious, but I'm not. Like when I pick up a guitar, especially something like as high quality as a Sir or a Collings, I know it's going to be great. It's just going to be what is this guitar going to do in the locker? Which job is it going to take? So I don't know. I mean, I guess there's some risk to it, but I've always been. Yeah, I mean, the same thing happened when I got the Collings. Honestly, we were playing a festival in the South somewhere. Oh God, what's the name of the festival? It's a massive festival. I can't remember for the life of me. And Collings was there. It was like they have a booth there. It's like a bluegrass festival.
Oh, so like South by Southwest or something like that?
No, it was, where was it? West Virginia.
Because they're in Austin.
Maybe. No. It was in West Virginia, I think. I can't remember the name of the festival. Anyway, and Mark Althans from Collings showed up with my guitar. Ariel Posen was in the band at the time, and we both ordered guitars, and he showed up, and we both took them on stage, and he was like, "You guys are crazy, man! Like you show up." I actually don't think I brought a guitar knowing that the Collings was going to be there, and he was like, "I can't believe you just pick up this guitar and go on stage with it." It was like, "It's just a guitar, man. I know how to play guitar, I guess." So like. if the setup is not exactly the way I want it, I can figure that out on the fly. It's not going to ruin my day if the action's too low.
Right.
So anyway, I guess maybe that's not the way most people do it, but I don't
you're going to be a good candidate for, guitarist warrior ninja, where they just give the 5 guitar players terribly set up guitars and see if they can get through
Here's
the gig.
an Ibanez gem. Go do your thing.
And you have like obstacles and stuff like that on stage, mouse traps and
yeah, exactly. You're barefoot. Yeah.
That'll be our next YouTube kind of segment.
I love it. It's like that those shows where they like the warrior shows where if you don't do something you get gooped or something. Yeah. I think that's great.
Yeah. I was thinking there's a show here called like American Ninja Warrior or something like that, and they go through these obstacle courses and they have to be really spry and flexible and strong, and
it's like
sort of test
CrossFit and parkour and I don't know, they're all like rich doctors and stuff.
Right. But we have that for guitar players, and we just see who is the most resilient, who can withstand, major distractions and still get through the gig.
As long as I don't have to do any jumping, that's fine. Nobody wants to see me jump.
Take some lessons with David Lee Roth and you'll be there in no time.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. That's actually, I think that those are cool guitar stories. I mean, I know you gave us the digested version of your Gold Top, but still, I think that maybe you're the X factor, and that's why it's sort of unimportant, if it's not set up or whatever. You're just evolved to the point where it's any instrument will do.
I don't know. I mean, that's very kind of you to say. I feel like I've been pretty lucky with some pretty great instruments.
Well, I guess it's not that kind, because I'm supposing, maybe.
Yeah, right. Maybe I'm supposing, but also it's just as entirely possible that not. But yeah.
My theory is that you might be the X factor, or your hands at least.
At least, yeah. I got to insure these things for tens of dollars.
Yeah, tens of dollars. Mm-hmm. Lloyd's of London.
That's right.
We'll call them up. We'll talk. We'll insure. I'm pretty sure that Clapton's hands got to be insured.
Yeah. Yeah, probably.
I would think.
I would think.
I mean, he's definitely not going to be using like a bandsaw in his country home. They're not going to keep him away from that thing.
I'm just going to go fix the stairs, and then there's some guy who shows up in a suit. He's just like, I don't know about that, sir.
Yeah. He's not allowed to do that. What about for amps? Like, what's sort of like, if we were to transplant sort of this story arc to amps, where do we land on those?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty Fender sort of derivative kind of guy. I've always been like a deluxe, or a twin, or the fabled DeVilles and Hot Rod Deluxes and stuff of festival backline lore.
Right.
So that's what I'm most comfortable on. And so, I mean, I use a 2-Rock now, which I love dearly. But I also have a small collection of older sort of Fender amps. I got a couple brown face amps and a couple black face amps, and then a couple of cool boutique, like I've got a Benson jobby and a Greer jobby, and and I really like those kind of things. But I'm most comfortable on something voiced kind of in the Fender realm.
And was the intent with getting a 2-Rock or a Benson or something like that, was that just just because you were interested in those, or because you thought those were maybe more tourable, or are you just using backline ordinarily when you're on tour?
I mean, it's such a roulette. So like half the time we're traveling with our own gear, half the time we're using backline. I got a 2-Rock because I had I was in LA a couple years ago on a session, and Josh Smith sent me a message on Instagram. I was like, "Hey man, if you're in town, come and hang out. Come by the studio." So I went to his studio, and he had a TS1, and I plugged into that, and it just sort of it sort of haunted my dreams for a while, and so I begged Josh to connect me with the 2-Rock guys to talk about getting an amp, and Eli was like, "What do you want? Like, what are you kind of interested in? And I was like, Josh's TS1 is just kind of, it's really messed me up, and it's haunting my dreams. And Josh had a TS1 with reverb, was kind of like he got a modded TS1. That was not a production line thing. And so I said, that's just really what I want. And Eli was like, yeah, but like I had to forego the master volume, and you don't play that loud, and you probably need a master volume. You wouldn't be happy with this amp without a master volume. And we're working on this new line, or this new model, the Bloomfield drive. And I think that's kind of going to be in your territory. And that's what he wound up building me. And that's been sort of my the heart and soul of my rig. Yeah, it's such a fantastic amp. But I mean, my main amp for a really long time was I thought it was a 65 non-reverb deluxe, but I later found out it's a 66. And that was my main guitar amp for a long time, and I still have it.
Stock speaker, or was it a Jensen, or?
No, I replaced the speaker because it had totally disintegrated. It was in my across the street neighbor had it. It was like, oh, I got an old guitar amp, and it was one of those kind of things. And brought it over one day, and it was like still had the original tubes in it, and he had pulled off the faceplate because he thought it made it look cooler, and threw it away. And, but yeah, so I replaced it with the Alessandro made
like the GS65 or whatever it is.
Yeah. I ordered a bunch of speakers from Eminence, because I think Eminence made that speaker for them, and I ordered
they did
a bunch of different speakers, and then I just sort of shot them out, and that was the one that sounded the best to me in that amp.
That seems the most appropriate for that amp, for like sort of period correct-ish speakers.
Yeah, it's killer. Most of like in the studio, I run everything through my 2-Rock 212, so
right.
The speaker in it doesn't get a whole lot of use, just because I prefer to have the amps in the control room with me so I can mess with knobs.
Right, no, that makes sense. And is your 2-Rock, is that 100 watt or is that a 50?
It's 100 watt.
The 100 watt.
Yeah.
And are you using the effects loop in that, or do you run everything into the input of the front of the amp?
Yeah, right now I'm running everything into the input of the front of the amp, but I also do kind of a wet dry thing, so I'll send the effects to a different amp often.
Okay, so you put some sort of splitter earlier in the chain?
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about doing like a real wet dry wet rig where you like use the line out off of the speaker on the head and run it into like line level effects in the mixer and all that?
I really want to do that. Yeah, and I've mocked up using the Poly Digit, you know, that crazy thing.
Mm-hmm. Because it has like some parallel.
Yeah. It's got 4 ins and 4 outs, so you can have sort of stereo inputs and then a pair of loops. And then there's all kinds of like modules that you can add to it. It's a bit of a Swiss Army knife for this kind of thing.
How many parallel loops can you have in it, like within its own effects that are in it? Like how many parallel chains can exist, you know?
Yeah, I guess you could probably run them as like as 3 parallel loops, but they would only be like a mono in and mono out. So,
but inside the Poly Digit, it has its own effects built in, right?
Oh yeah. I don't actually know how many modules you can run at once. Like did you watch that pedal show where Dan tried to make Dan made the 4-headed tape delay?
I watched a couple of sections of it, mostly on account of how the thumbnail looked.
Yeah, I just got such a kick out of it, and I was like, I bet you I could recreate this in the Poly Digit, and then I ran into DSP issues, but it was because I literally had like a bajillion modules open. But right now, like I run, I have a delay pedal in the loops, panner module, so you can sort of send MIDI CC messages to sort of tell it how far left or how far right or right up and down you want it to be. And then you can also sort of decide if it's totally wet effects only, or you can have a dry through if you have to run a different rig or whatever. So it's a pretty versatile little thing. But actually, like running a tap off of the speaker and like doing it like the 80s. No, I haven't gotten there, but I really want to. Much
You
to my
should.
sound guy's dismay. He's
Well,
just like, 3 amps.
I've always talked about. You can do it. The thing I think people forget about on that is that the wet cabs were never amps. It was a super linear power amp. Like sometimes they were like 200-watt tube power amps that were just feeding the wet cabinets. So it wasn't really like you weren't getting any preamp. Like it wasn't running into the front of a preamp. It was just power amp and super linear. So the way that I think is the easiest to do it is, you still need the line out box, because presumably the Two-Rock I don't think has a dedicated line out of it anyway.
No.
And then you'd feed, your 100% wet effects in the mixer. And then you'd feed it into one of those cab Zeus's or one of those cabinet power amp emulation that's digital. And then you would feed those to your interface or your mixer. And then you'd have the left and right as just cabinet simulated in power amp simulated, because it doesn't need to have a tube color. And most of those guys weren't using super colored, effects after that. It was just going into a 100 or 200 watt, power amp that didn't, it was pretty linear.
Right.
And then it was feeding into EVM 12Ls, also really linear.
Yeah,
close
right.
mic,
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of, the processing was pretty straightforward. And so using something like a Cab Zeus or a Two Notes Cab M or some small thing that kind of does the speaker simulation, and then you can have it in your in-ears, and then that works better for your sound guys because you don't have to worry about 3 amps. You only have your dry amp is the only one on stage.
Right.
And then you can get,
that's
wet left,
sort of.
wet right, and then dry center. And it's a little more transportable for, if you really want to do a true wet, dry, wet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can mix them all acoustically, because the problem doing it the way that you're doing it is that the order affects each other of everything. Whereas in a real wet, dry, wet, everything's in parallel. So they each are getting their own version of the line out.
Right. Well, and what I'm doing in this rig is I'm running 2 different analog delays that are run in parallel. So they are in parallel. They're not seeing each other. But it's definitely it's a work in progress. We'll get there. We'll figure it out. But yeah.
Are you building them yourself now?
The rigs?
You're building your rigs yourself now?
Oh yeah. I'm too fussy not to. Like I'm just like, and I also I don't have the budget to pay somebody to do it every time as part of the thing. So
right.
I'm pretty handy with the soldering iron. Like I don't really do any circuitry stuff, but I build all my own wire and cable.
You soldering your own cables?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What are you using for your cables?
I'm using this Canar cable.
Oh, the Canary, okay.
Yeah.
And what about for the plugs?
I'm using square plugs.
Nice.
Yeah, I like them just because they're low profile. I don't know.
So
is there wire out there that, I mean, obviously I think Mogami is kind of the most popular, but
I think that the Mogami has some smaller diameters that have sort of equal amount of capacitance, and so they can be a little bit more malleable on a pedal board, so that, like, if you're using a switcher in particular, you can make those wire runs with a little less girth, since you don't have these really thick leads that are kind of coming out. Because I think even the GS, you're probably using GS4 for yours.
What is it? It's either 4 mil or 5 mil. I can't remember. I think it's 4 mil.
Yeah. I think it's a GS4. And sonically, I think it's really all, especially if you have high quality buffers. And I did this shootout with like Josh Scott and Corey Wong and Dan from that pedal show, where we basically ran, kind of a pedal board's worth of all the common cables, and then had them all sort of listen to them through high and low gain amps with clean and dirty, Strat and Les Paul. And there was some variability between them, but then once the buffer was introduced, then they were like all almost unintelligible. Like it went from maybe being a 10% variety, or variables between them, to being like a 1%. So it kind of tells the story of the cable is within a reasonable margin of quality. The variability of the sound of the cables narrows greatly the better the quality of the buffer is. So if you use like a Boss buffer, it was maybe didn't close the margin as much. And then if it was like a really high quality one, then that really closed the margin considerably. So that was kind of the finding of the test.
Cool. Yeah. Well,
So
those
buffers were the real winner there.
Okay, good to know. Good to know.
So,
I mean, I've kind of avoided going. Like I think when I was like 20, I went out and spent like $300 on a speaker cable, and I was really excited about it because I had this really, it was like a foot long, and then I left it at a gig, and when I went to go get it, it was never to be seen again. So I was like, okay, well that's the last time I spend that kind of money on something that I will for sure leave at a gig.
yeah, well, now that you know how to solder, so you can really, the trick is gauge, thicker the gauge speaker cable, better the better it's going to be. But then there's like a threshold. If it gets too heavy, I've actually seen situations where the jacks get bent and stuff like that because that the copper in a speaker cable is much thicker than a guitar cable. They can get heavy fast.
There's some serious weight going on there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's like, it gets to a point where like you can fall down on those rabbit holes, and by the time you get to the end of it, you're not making music. You're spending
right.
all this time researching cable when you could just plug into your stuff and play music. And for me, I mean, like I have a relationship with a distributor that sells the wire that I'm using for my board builds, and that's
kinda, Canary is totally fine. It was in that group of acceptable, DIY cable, and the truth is it's going to be better than most of the prefab stuff that you could get, and you can customize it however you want.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, to me, the main thing I was excited about was the lower profile plug, so I can just jam more stuff on my pedal board. That's really what it's all about. More pedals.
Yeah. Yeah, and soldering is good. I'm glad to hear it because friends don't let friends go solderless, as I always say.
Yeah, I just like, I had I did use the Evidence stuff for a long time, but I mean, the amount of times that stuff barely breaks down, but it still did break down on me, and I had wires just go down on stage, and you jiggle the jack, and it was like, well, something just came undone, and that just happens so much less with soldered wired in my or soldered wires.
Well, I mean, it's not rocket science, I mean, there's something to be said about gas tight connections. You can't get it with a solderless. It's just a scientific impossibility, and I think that there's some people that are into the dogma of it, and so they're sort of like arguing a point that's not there when they go to solderless. And I was like, hey man, I have no problem with the Evidence cable. If you like the cable, use that cable to solder it. That's not the cable that's the problem. It's the connection is where the problem is.
Yeah.
So, if you have a preference for a George L or whatever, use it. God bless you. Just solder.
Solder.
It'll work way better.
Yeah.
At least over time it will. So because unless you're in, and maybe this is more common. This is maybe why people don't have problems with it. Is that you play guitar at home, you're sort of in this vacuum that doesn't at all reflect the realities of the road, and so you may have a completely different opinion about solderless if you're pretty isolated. You never move stuff. Your board never gets moved. It's very sedentary. And maybe in those conditions you could get away with it, but everybody else,
the amount that my pedal boards are getting chucked around on airplanes or in the back of the van or whatever, it's just got to be, absolutely airtight.
So back to the amps. If the studio is, the hypothetical studio is on fire, you can take one amp out. Which one is it going to be?
Oh, that's awful. That's an awful question.
You gonna go sentimental, or are you gonna go practical?
Oh, that's heartbreaking. If the studio is on fire, oh my God, I just sit in this chair and let it burn around me, baby. I'm going down with the ship. My wife is just be like, you fucking better not. Oh, sorry. Don't go down with the ship.
We're okay. We've got it marked as E explicit. So
perfect.
You can go.
I can drop off a couple Fs right on. I don't know, man.
You're practicing, for fatherhood here, so we're gonna.
That's right. That's right. Oh man, and I know that my kid is gonna learn to swear from me, and everybody will be very disappointed when that happens. It would be a long hesitation between the 2-Rock and the Deluxe combo,
Right?
And the Deluxe is very sentimental, and I think I set the scene for being a pretty sentimental guy, so. It would be I don't know what I would take.
I think it's a foregone conclusion. The Deluxe is going. I mean, you could replace the 2-Rock.
That is true. That is true. I mean, I hate to say it, but they do a good job of making great amps, and I've played a number of them, and they're all great. But that Deluxe is like, it's a special spot in my heart. It was that was the amp that I used on my first record, and that record did really well for us. And well, I mean, it just. Yeah, it means a lot. So I'd probably take the Deluxe. I do have
It's the amp you had when you met your wife.
It's the amp I had when I met my wife. That's true. It's the amp I had when the child was conceived. No,
right. You brought it into the hospital, into the birthing room, or was it maybe it was a home birth?
Yeah. It was like, throw it in the tub. Yeah, exactly. Like, I know, honey. I know. I got to bring the Deluxe. The Deluxe has got to go everywhere important. But yeah, that's tough. But no, the Deluxe. I would take the Deluxe for sure.
Yeah, they're great amps. I have a 64 right next to me right here, and it's got reverb though. But yeah, and also non-original speaker.
Have you played one of the non-reverb ones?
No, they're great. It's a little different. Yeah, for sure. And I actually would argue, they're a little cleaner because they don't have that extra gain stage for the reverb and stuff like that, the tremolo.
Yeah, and I think that's either a good thing or a bad thing depending on kind of how you like to play. But I mean, I love this thing, and I at first was kind of like, oh, I wish it had reverb, and then when I started playing old Deluxe reverbs, was like, man, I kind of think I like mine better. But you can't go wrong with an old Blackface Fender. You just can't.
No, and there's some real sleepers out there too. Like everybody goes for the Deluxes and the Princetons, but a Blackface Bandmaster or things like that. Like people sleep on those. I pick up old Bandmaster heads all the time, between $600 and $800 from that era.
That's crazy. Yeah. And it's like,
nobody wants them.
Most of them are virtually the same circuit, with obviously different output transformers.
The preamp circuits are the same on every single Fender. It's like they're the same thing. Yeah. Really that's what the differences are really more on the output side.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're really excellent amps. I agree. I can't get, I'm nowhere near the player that you are, but I still love those amps, and that would certainly be my choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, yeah, it's a good amp. It's a real good amp.
Yeah, they're special. Yeah, and 2-Rocks are great too, though. I don't know if you've ever heard me tell this story, but when I was taking guitar lessons as a teenager, I was at the studio called Zone Music in Cotati, California, and Bill Crenard, the former owner of 2-Rock, used to have a hi-fi repair business in the same complex where I would take lessons. He would rent like a small room from Zone Music, and he would do his repairs, and I would wait out on the bench for my guitar teacher to finish with the student before me, and Bill would have his sliding glass door open and would be like fixing hi-fi equipment and tube amps and stuff like that, and I would just talk to him as like a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
And eventually he started K&M Analog Designs, which is sort of the precursor to 2-Rock. Yeah. And they had some of the amps in the guitar store. And I remember just being so confused by all the knobs and switches. Like, I think I had a crate, amp that had like 4 knobs or something like that. And I just remember not knowing like what to do with it. And within a number of years, then John Mayer was using the amps, and it was like the whole echelon of the company sort of completely evolved. But I always have these fond memories of kind of 2-Rock in its infancy, and kind of Bill always, I didn't know anything about electronics at that point, and was sort of just indulging, a young teenage kid, or I might not even have been a teenage kid yet, and he was just kind of showing me amps and hi-fi gear and stuff like
Oh, that's
that.
cool.
So it's kind of funny.
Bill has
Yeah.
very Yoda vibes to him. He's all knowing. Yeah.
Yeah, that whole complex had like all these kind of guys that were all kind of like Bill's vibe. There was also like a guitar guy in there that was kind of the same way, and they were all pretty cool guys. And Bill is still, he's definitely like that, very very wise guy, and has an incredible collection of gear too.
Oh, does he? I haven't
Yeah.
seen that yet, but
If you ever have a chance to go to his house, it's pretty incredible.
Oh, cool. I'll definitely have to try and do that next time I'm in the neighborhood.
Next time you're in Sonoma County.
Yeah, which actually happens. It does happen sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Let's move to pedals.
Hell yeah.
What are maybe you think that it's more strategic that we start in sort of like, maybe we talk about your signal path first, or kind of like your kind of prototypical signal path, and then maybe we can get into the specifics of other types of pedals. So like, what are you using right now? I saw the rigs of Dad that you had
yeah
on Instagram, but like, when you're, with whenever you're planning to play next, in public, what's kind of the rig that you're kind of envisioning or have already set up using your square plugs and Canary GS4?
Yeah, I love that. I feel very seen. I'm in the process of building a new rig right now, and it's definitely going to look a lot different. Well, part of it is going to look the same as what I normally use, but the front half of it, the drive section, is going to be more different than it's been in a really long time. I've always been a Blues Breaker fan. I still am. I love that. I love that circuit, and I collaborated with the Jackson Audio guys on an overdrive pedal, the Golden Boy, and it's a killer pedal. But a handful of years ago, I got really into brown face amps, and I bought Super. There's a bit of a story behind why I wanted a Super, but I found when I was living in Toronto at the time, and I found one, and I paid too much money for it. But I fell in love with it, and I used it a ton on a record that I put out a couple years ago called Hindsight. And so I bought one of those Greer Soma 63 pedals to kind of try and recreate that tone. But by the time I got that pedal and started touring, we weren't really playing any of that material anymore, and so it just didn't really make sense. So we're in the process of making a new record, my brother and I, and the Brownface Super has kind of made a reappearance, and so I'm really excited because I'm kind of building this rig around that sort of more brownface tone. So I'm running that into the Bloomfield, and I'm a big fuzz nerd. I like fuzz faces, and I'm in the process of collaborating with Dan from Dan Drive Pedals on a bit of a take on the Zonk machine.
Oh, nice.
And I bought a reissue, and really didn't like it. Like I've heard so many people, like Doyle Bramhall used a Zonk, most recently, I think, and I was like, man, if Doyle likes it, then it's gonna be great. And I bought one and I plugged it in, and it was like this. There's things about this circuit that I really like, but it's so bright that it's just it would never work. So I had sort of collected a few of Dan's pedals and reached out to him and said, hey, I really like what you did with this. I really like what you did with this, but I kind of need it to do this and this and this. And so we're working on something right now that's pretty cool. So
nice.
The Soma 63, that's going to be kind of the heart and soul of the drive section, and then the dynamic distortion, I messaged you, or I posted about it the other day.
Yeah.
Because you had sent me a bunch of pedals, which are all great. And I'm sorry that more of them haven't wound up on my pedal board, but
no, I mean, well, this is like sort of the benefit of being a pedal guy and not an amp guy, is that you can ingratiate, people with these care packages that are relatively, like if I were an amp company, I couldn't send you like 5 amps,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But this is sort of the easy transport and all that stuff. And so, you throw the spaghetti at the wall and you hope some stuff sticks. And I'm just happy that you gave them a try. And even if one makes a reprisal a year or two later, it's still good for me.
Well, and you had sent me a care package, and you said I sent you this dynamic distortion, and I distinctly remember you saying it's probably not going to be up your alley, and you'd sort of said
that I would say that,
and this is kind of why they're pretty bright, and they're really the dynamic range is really big, but so I kind of didn't really mess with it, and then I've been on parental leave since my daughter was born. And I've just been like really kind of trying to mess around with new sounds, because I think what I'm trying to get at is I almost always use the same thing. I use some sort of fuzz face, some sort of klon, some sort of blues breaker, and those have been my sounds. I almost always have a compressor on my pedal board, and I almost never turn it on. Like this. I'm such a creature of habit that there's just like, you never know. I might want to have that, and then it takes up a spot on my pedal board, and people always ask me, like, how do you set your compressor? And I'm like, I don't know. I never turn it on.
Off.
Yeah. I set it so that it takes up space, and it uses a loop on my switcher and an outlet on my power supply, and then the button's always off. But yeah. So, anyways, I had come to the studio one day to just pick up some goodies and just to mess around with. I got one of those Line 6 HX Stomps for just playing at home and not driving everybody nuts, and just sort of started messing around with pedals, and the dynamic distortion was one of the ones that I thought, I'm gonna take this thing for a spin, and just really, really fell quite in love with it. So that's gonna be a part of the new rig as well. There's I feel like I've also used a lot of harmonic trim, so that's something that I think people sort of know that I'm a fan of. So there will be some version of that, but I also, on the new record, I've been using a lot of Univibe in the vibrato setting, and just really getting into that kind of like sort of like pitch shifty C-sick kind of sound, and really falling in love with that sound. So
what are you using for the Univibe?
I have on the record I used the Vibro. I bought one of those big old things. Ones. And it sounds incredible, but it's so big and heavy, right.
This is the challenge, man. With Univibes is, when you start getting them small, there's compromises that need to be made.
Yeah. So that one sounds incredible. I'm not a connoisseur of Univibes, so I mean, like I couldn't tell you what's the best.
What are you gonna do for the rig?
I'm right now I'm shooting out the Jam Pedals Retro Vibe.
Okay.
And I really like it so far. It does
against what?
I have a Sweet Sound.
The Mojo Vibe.
The Mojo Vibe, which is wicked, but it's really dark. Like it's really, really dark. And the one thing that I wasn't expecting, because I do like dark tones, but when I played it next to the Vibro, it was like, oh man, it's like too dark, and it's kind of obscuring things. Like it is such a great pedal, but I kind of found myself wanting something that was a little brighter, and the Retro Vibe is kind of doing it for me. And
have you messed with the Vibe Machine from the Croatian company?
Yeah, I have one of those too. I don't know. I feel like I want something analog.
Are those not analog?
I don't think they are. Maybe they are.
Okay.
Maybe I, and this could just be me like falling for snake oil, so, but, and I will, like, before the comment section comes for me, I'll come for myself. Maybe I'm falling for some horse shit. I don't know. But,
yeah. I'm just trying to think about, well, I'll tell you one that's actually pretty good that a lot of people sleep on, and obviously it's been out for a long time, but it still sounds really good. Is those mini full tone ones, like the ones from the era that like Doyle Bramhall was still playing with Eric Clapton.
The cream colored one.
No, it was sort of an intermediary one that was made in a Hammond box, so it was kind of unlike any of the ones that were ever like super production versions. It was in an unpainted Hammond enclosure, and I'm trying to think if I have anything on the shelf that kind of resembles the size that I could show you visually.
I think I know what you're talking about. I remember
Osnoy used to use one for a while, and it's just in a kind of a smaller rectangular box. Like the size of an MXR flanger, but like a little higher than that.
Oh, no way. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And they sound incredible. They sound really good. People kind of have slept on them. Those are incredible. And, are a little more pedalboard friendly. Kind of gets you in the vibe of the bigger ones.
Yeah.
But is not gargantuan.
Yeah. Well, maybe I should dig out the dry bell one again and give that another shot.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not plugging it as like I think it sounds so good. I think it's fine. I just knew that it was small and kind of more pedalboard friendly.
Yeah, I'm definitely trying to walk the line. Like I bought myself a very big pedalboard with the dreams of making like making this huge rig and kind of using making decisions more oh yeah.
This guy.
Oh yeah. That's exactly what I thought you were talking about.
Yeah. That's the well, I guess I have to log into Strat Talk, but you get the vibe.
I get the vibe.
That's the one.
Hey,
yeah.
Pun intended or what? What else do I have on the wall?
Yeah. So what was the big pedalboard that you bought though?
This company in Australia makes called CNC. And the reason I settled on that company was I got a buddy out there who builds pedalboards, and he said I helped this guy design this line of pedalboards, and I think they're really, really good. And it came with a flight case.
CNC pedalboards.
It's CNC cases, and I think the website is Pedalboards by Caseman, and they're nice boards, and they come in a flight case, but they're light. They're super, super light. So, I've just been running into like. I love the Schmidt array boards. I love them. They're gorgeous. But when I start to get the pedalboard, sort of the pedalboard size of my dreams, it becomes really hard to fly with because they're heavy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, have you seen our pedalboards?
I haven't. No.
Okay. Yeah, they're all aircraft aluminum, so they're like super light.
Oh, shoot. Oh.
Basically, the whole intent of them was that even the biggest. I mean, we don't make a bunch of sizes, but the biggest size is still under normal baggage weight assembled. I mean, like there's obviously some caveats to that. Like if you used all steel enclosures of every single pedal, then you're probably going to be kicked over. But presuming it's sort of normal guitar pedals that are on here, that would fit across it.
Yeah.
And they're designed to fit inside of the Pelican air cases. That it would be the largest size you could fit would still be under the 50-pound limit.
Yeah, that's what I'm after. Well, when I inevitably go to build a slightly smaller board because that'll be more reasonable, I'll buy one of yours.
Yeah, well, hit us up. I mean, it's certainly I'll be the first to say we're not the first to do the sort of hinged tiered thing, but I will say that we definitely made it more travelable than the other people that have done it. Because sometimes, I mean, I think Schmidt was really smart. I think the challenge is that if you really want to fly with a big one, you kind of need like a case for the case because you can't, those just can't take hits like that and without impacting the entire board because the case is the board.
Yeah.
And so I mean I think for a carry-on, I totally get it. I think that it was a genius idea.
Yeah. And they're just absolutely beautiful. They're really well made, really, really well made. But yeah, by the time you're getting, a board the size that I'm using and then flying internationally, you can't put that thing in the cargo hold without something. And what I was doing was I was flying it in a large suitcase, like basically the biggest sort of soft-sided suitcase I could find, or like hard plastic-sided suitcase. And it was basically I would spend $200 on a suitcase and sacrifice it because by the time it got to Germany or whatever, all the the wheels were knocked off and the zipper was barely hanging on.
Right,
but the pedalboard
was inside it.
Yeah, but the pedalboard wasn't dinged up. But it's like it was just like I needed something that was flight rated. Yeah, my buddy hooked me up with that company, so I got one of those coming. So I'm like, I really want to load it full of my favorite stuff within the weight limit. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun. I'm having fun dreaming up this rig because we're messing around with lots of like room reverbs. My booth, I really love the way my booth sounds. So we're using a lot of room reverbs on the guitar sounds and using the polydigit to kind of recreate some of those, like
Nice.
making my own IRs of the room. And although it's not the same as actually having mics up in a room, it sort of gets most of the way there for like a live sound. So really, really messing with that kind of stuff and trying to play with finding ways to create space in the guitar sound that is still kind of organic-y and sort of like tips its hat in the direction of the sounds that we got off this record. And so it's just like I'm finding the process of like dreaming these sounds up to be really fun and just figuring out like, okay, well, if I make this IR this way and EQ it this way and then have it on an expression pedal so that I can blend it in, then we can kind of recreate how some of these fades happened and, stuff like that. I'm just having a blast.
That's cool.
Yeah. Well, and we'll see. I mean, I don't know. There's a very good chance that I just put my favorite pedals on the little tiny pedal train and then put that in my backpack and get, just play the way I normally do.
Well, but, there can always be, it can be a both sort of situation. I mean, I guess depending on what your circumstances, right? Like if you're coming, if you're doing spot dates or whatever, maybe it doesn't make sense. If you're backlining stuff, you might just want to take a really abbreviated pedal board that's got the basics and
yeah.
You can have both. You don't have to choose.
That's true. And who knows? Maybe touring is never a thing that ever happens ever again. And God, I hope that's not true. But yeah.
Well, then you just set up your cameras in there, and you can perform for the internet, the biggest audience in the world.
Hey, there you go. It could be worse. But yeah, so that's kind of the rig rundown, if you will. I also really love analog delay pedals, so I'm a big fan of. I really like the Chase Bliss stuff, and I've been using that stuff for a long time. I picked up a bunch of stuff from the Jam pedal guy, so I'm trying out their delay llama pedal.
Delay llama. Yeah.
It's really, really great pedal. Sounds really, really great. It's got some sort of presettable kind of things, so which is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's sort of my my rig in a nutshell.
So if you were to say to somebody, that's trying to kind of go after your tone, you kind of talked about some of the kind of the Joey Landreth holy trinity of overdrives, which are the Klon style, the Blues Breaker style, and what was the third one? The
like a fuzz face.
Fuzz face.
Yeah.
So the holy trinity of distortion.
Yeah.
Is those. If somebody couldn't afford, let's say, a Zonk, or they couldn't afford a Golden Boy, or they couldn't afford, or an original Blues Breaker for that matter.
Yeah.
Or a Klon, do you have sort of versions of those that you've tried that you think are kind of in the ballpark, that maybe are accessible to, let's say, somebody who's kind of just starting to kind of collect pedals, or maybe is a younger guitar player that's, going to trade up a few more times before they get the real deal?
Yeah. I mean, for fuzz faces, it's such a fussy thing. They're really fussy little devices, and so you can spend, $500, $600, $700 on one and still have it be a dog or more. So, and that happens a lot. I mean, how many times have you seen somebody talk about, oh yeah, I had this vintage fuzz face and the transistors were in backwards, so I had to go, that kind of thing happens. I think you can honestly, like the Dunlop fuzz faces, go to the store and try a few of them out and see if one sounds good to you. I've played through the blue one, the mini blue one. Yeah, and it sounds fine. It totally sounds fine. It's like, it's not as exciting to play through as something that's a little more robust, but it sounds great. For me, like having a fuzz pedal that is dynamic and cleans up with your volume pot, that's, I mean, I guess the germanium is really the key for that, but like something that reacts to your playing. That's kind of what I like out of a fuzz pedal. I feel like fuzz pedal is just like super interactive with how you play and how you pick, and where your controls are at on your guitar makes a massive difference. So that's what's
Absolutely.
that's the most exciting thing to me about a great fuzz pedal. So, but the good news about fuzz pedals is that, I think just by virtue of what they are, you can just get lucky and find a great one. So you just have to play through a bunch of them. But there's lots of cheap varieties.
Yeah. What about for like Klon stuff? Have you found any that you felt are like good representations that were like maybe more on a budget?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the Electro-Harmonic Soul Food is pretty great. I mean, I think a lot of people make mods for it that make them better. But I mean, like
Right.
if you don't have a lot of money, you got $60-$70. That will get you a lot of the way there. The Archer guys make the Icon pedal, which is great. My pal Zach from Mythos, he makes a great
Yeah.
Klon, which is, they're getting a little more expensive at that point, but it's a hell of a lot less money than a real one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
there's lots of great examples. What's those guys? They make the Tumnus,
Oh, Wampler.
Wampler. That I think I've never actually played through one of those, but I think people like those a lot, and they make a little mini one too.
And then for Blues Breakers, you got the Golden Boy, of course, is kind of
naturally.
naturally. And then what are some? I was actually somebody had asked me this the other day, and I was like, oh, those Analog Man Princes of Tone were pretty good deals, and then I looked and they weren't. They were like, $600 or something, or $500. I was like, oh man, those really went up.
Yeah. You know what? Honestly, the King of Tone, if you got the time to wait, like I think they're like, I bought a King of Tone 5 years ago. And it was like $250 US, but it just took forever. But
yeah,
Exotic makes that BB preamp that I think is pretty great. I'm pretty sure that's a Blues Breaker BB, I believe. Who else makes one? I mean,
VHS makes the Morning Glory.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Morning Glory.
Kind of in that room.
The Timmy is kind of, although I don't know if those are reasonable priced or not. I'm not sure.
I don't actually. He purports that's something original that nobody's ever done before. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I haven't actually really looked at what he's doing. But
yeah.
But MXR made like a compacted version of it that's, I think, around 120 or 130, something like that. So,
yeah. Honestly, I feel like, and I'm sure you probably have a pretty good opinion of this, but like, I really think that the place to spend your money is on a great amp.
Yeah.
And honestly, cables that are reliable, they don't need to be the most expensive cables on the market. Just don't buy the molded ones.
Yeah, just get some Canaries. You can get the GS6 for your instrument. Is that what you're using for your instrument cables? You follow in suit?
No, what am I honestly, I just sort of use whatever right now. I'm trying out the Vemuram cables right now.
Oh, okay.
Which are pretty wicked. But I'm honestly, as like, I'm not really that fussy. I mean, maybe I should be more fussy, but as long as it's not like the $15 discount bin, I don't know. Long and McQuaid here in Canada has a proprietary brand called Yorkville, and they make a cable called the Studio One, I think, which is like you can get a 15-foot cable for $30 or $40 Canadian, and it's a fine cable, and that's what I use most often.
Shout out Long and McQuaid.
What? Do.
You need to get that endorsement.
That's right. Where's my paycheck, L&M?
Yeah,
give it to me. But yeah, I think like that sort of philosophy was absolutely devastatingly pounded home when I saw Jack Pearson play in Nashville one night. I went with Zach. We went to the Station Inn, and he was playing, and he had like a Squier Strat and I think a Boss DD5 or something, or DD3. I don't think he had anything else other than that. He might have had some sort of boost or overdrive pedal, and he was plugged into a really nice amp. I don't remember what it was, but it looked like kind of looked like a Tweed Bassman style sort of cabinet, and his tone was incredible. and that was just for me was like it's in the hands, you know. The guy's got a piece of shit guitar and piece of shit pedals plugged into a nice amp and a great pair of hands. And I think, like, you know, if you got to spend your money on something, I'd buy a nice amp, some pedals, and learn how to use them. Like for me, my first pedal that was on my pedal board for a really long time was an Ibanez sound tank tube screamer, like the ones in the plastic enclosure. And that was my main overdrive sound for a long time. Yeah. And I don't think they sound very good, but you just figure out how to make it work. And then when you start to graduate into nicer sounding stuff, you know, then you've got the experience, you know what to do with something that gives you more, you know.
Right.
Like I don't know, something like the dynamic distortion, where it's like,
right,
it's got a lot of it's got a lot on tap, lots of gain, lots of treble, lots of volume. But if you know what to do with all those things, you know how to sort of make all that stuff work with your rig, you know. And you only learn that, I think, by problem solving and using less good stuff.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, the dynamic distortion is a really interesting pedal for us. It came out really strong, and it did really well at first. And then I would say of any of our pedals, it's probably like tapered off the most over time. Like it had a really strong showing when it first came out. And then, you know, like I think we sold probably 2,000 of them in the first year. And then it dropped off, you know, where it's been out since maybe 2016. And I think we've maybe sold 5,000 total or something like that.
Right.
You know, so that first couple of years that first year was like, you know, the graph went way up, and then it was just like this. And I think part of it was our fault in that, like, we didn't do a good job of sort of detailing sort of the application. And I think that a lot of players too in a guitar store, when they go to a pedal, they tend to set everything at noon. And it's believed to be that that's sort of like the neutral. And on the dynamic distortion, that is not the neutral.
That's not at all the case. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the impression is then that this is like, wow, this pedal is really bright, and you know, I think that the thing that I discounted when I had told you that I didn't think it would be good for you is how much you use your volume and tone controls. Because if you're manipulating that a lot, that pedal is really incredible, because it's like having 4 different overdrive or distortion tones just by way of where things are, because it's very reactive on the input of how much gain there is, and that circuit is very sensitive to kind of what's going on with your tone controls and your volume controls and stuff like that on the instrument that you're playing it with. So, you know, I'm glad that it's made a reprisal for you. You know, the great irony of this is that there's like hardly any of them left. Like I'm probably not going to manufacture them again, because I don't think that they were popular enough to necessitate it.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting if we get some Joey Landreth fans that all of a sudden become interested in the dynamic distortion, and there's just none to be had anymore. Or I guess they could go to Reverb or whatever.
Yeah, drive up the price on reverb.com.
Right.
Yeah.
That's gonna be the approach, is to create buzz on all of our kind of sunset pedals.
yeah. I mean that's the move. That's the move.
Right. Yeah, but it's a cool pedal. I'm glad that you found a use for it. Certainly when I was listening to the clips, and anybody who's listening to this should go over to Instagram and check out Joey's Instagram page, because I thought it sounded pretty good, and I thought you were using it with Soma, I think, for those clips. I think it sounded incredible.
Going into the Soma. Yeah. I mean, it kind of blew me away. Like I plugged it in and was just like, oh man, I don't just kind of like this pedal. I really love this pedal. Pedal. It kind of makes me want to wrap the rig around it. You know, I don't know. It's pretty cool. And it's so far out of what I normally use. And so it's fun. I mean, like for me, that's kind of the key. You know, I'm very driven by the desire to just make stuff. Like I love making music and improvising, and you know, so anything that's gonna like that's going to help sort of push and promote creativity. So anything that takes me out of my comfort zone, takes one out of their comfort zone that's so great for creativity. So, that's even though like half of me is like OCD creature of habit, must have Bluesbreaker, must have Klon, must have Fuzzface. But then sometimes, I went through a phase where I was like really struggling creatively. So I took nothing but a fuzz pedal and a wah-wah to gigs, and was like, this is not what I normally do. I almost always pair a fuzz pedal with some other overdrive. So to go straight into the front of the amp with the fuzz pedal was outside of my comfort zone. So how do I make this work? And it was stressful, to be doing that during shows, but it was really exciting. I had a guy, I was living in Toronto at the time, and I was playing sort of like my annual hometown show there, and this guy drove like 3 hours from somewhere north of town and showed up, and I didn't have a pedalboard, and he was mad and wanted his money back. It was like, I came all this way to see the pedalboard that was on that pedal show, and you were here with a fucking fuzz pedal and a wah-wah. Like, what gives? And I was like, I don't know, man. I thought maybe you might want to hear me sing my songs, but I guess no.
What a bro.
Yeah, total bro.
Dang.
Total bro.
Dang.
Cold as ice. I don't give a shit about your
Dang.
songs. I want to see that wiring.
That doesn't sound very Canadian. He probably drove up from Buffalo.
Almost certainly. Certainly. Take that man's passport back.
Yeah.
He's not allowed to have Tim Hortons ever again.
Yeah. You can call it. Maybe there's a Canadian and border agent there that won't let that guy through next time.
Yeah, we'll put the word out.
Although now, who knows? I don't even think I could get into Canada right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure even what the restrictions are. I mean, it just seems like traveling across borders right now is just such a crazy idea. I mean, I know people are doing it, but I think you can if you really want to. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Let's find out. Let's go crazy. Let's figure it out.
Yeah. We'll call up Justin Trudeau.
Yeah. Hey JT, what do you think about this? Hard no.
Yeah.
Hard no, bud.
Yeah, man. I think you kind of like took us through everything. I think the only thing I didn't ask you about was I asked you about the worst case scenario that we don't want to think about and that we're not going to have to think about because it's never going to happen with the fire. But what about if like you are using backline, or you were going to say to somebody like, here's an amp that you could use that would be great for pedals? Do you think that the standard Hot Rod DeVille, Hot Rod Deluxes are kind of an acceptable place, or have you found any sort of sleepers that you think might work that are around that price point that you think are worth mentioning?
I mean, I feel like I have played through so many Hot Rod DeVilles and Hot Rod Deluxes that they're far from my favorite amp, but I know exactly what to do with them. When I get to a gig and they're like, this is the backline amp, it's not like, oh yeah, sweet, like how lucky are we? It's like, okay, I know what to do with that. It's there's a bit of a stiffness to them that I kind of struggle with. But I know a lot of lots and lots of people love, and I mean, like I've heard people make those things sound incredible. So it's just, you just kind of have to walk up to it with an open mind. And I mean, like, I don't know. The only thing that I can't for the life of me make work is an AC30. Every time I plug into an AC30, it's just like, but I've heard people plug into them and get the most incredible sounds. I just can't do it. I do not get those amps.
Right.
Yeah.
What about like, so you're usually getting hot rods. Do you ever get Lone Stars?
Oh man, like the odd time you'd get a Lone Star. Yeah.
Are those easier for you?
Not really, because it just you see them so rarely.
Right.
You know what I would like, honest to God, I'd rather see is a twin than any of the other mentioned amps, which I think for a lot of people a twin is like, oh God, kill me. They're so loud and clean. But for somebody who uses pedals, it's a pretty easy thing to kind of make work.
So you don't find those to be stiffer than the hot rods?
I mean, if you're trying to get any kind of action out of the amp, yeah, they definitely are. but I find I can get enough sort of squish out of my overdrive pedals or a fuzz pedal. Like, I mean, it is definitely stiffer, but there's something about a DeVille to me that is super stiff and also very floppy at the same time, like in different frequencies. Like it's almost like the low mids are kind of flappy and floppy, and the low end is like really weird and tight. But again, it's just something that's like I know what to do with that. I know kind of how to set it to at least get a sound that I can kind of feel inspired by. My favorite backline situation was I had asked for a pair of deluxes, and the music store was all out of them, and so they brought a pair of Princetons, and I thought, oh man, this is gonna be too quiet, and it was incredible. It was so fun, and it was also a small gig. Like it was a sort of like a PAC gig in a small town, and so it was like an old a hockey arena kind of thing. So it was like not a place that you really want to be cranking stage volume, and it was perfect. It was super perfect, and to the point where it's like, like 2 Princetons is not really going to cut it on a big stage, but just about anything else, that's going to be a new backline thing. So anyway,
nice. Was it a blackface or was it the silverface Princetons?
They were the silverface reissues.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
I was really, really impressed. Like plugged into it and started to play. I was like, hey, where have you been this whole time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you haven't gotten one yet.
I haven't gotten one yet. There's still time.
This is where that sort of that Long and McQuaid thing is going to come in, or that endorsement.
A buddy of mine, do you know Justin Weaver by chance?
I feel like I know this name.
Yeah,
I'm going to be really embarrassed if I turn out to know him, and I just said
he's killer guitar player, Nashville guy, plays with the Dixie Chicks, among Winona Judd and a lot of folks like that. And he's a good friend, and he has like an old silverface Princeton. I don't know exactly what year. I want to say like later, kind of getting like not quite in like mid 70s, but like either late 60s, early 70s, kind of in the no zone for Fender, to be honest.
Right.
And it's one of my favorite amps on the planet.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Some of those 70s ones, I mean, they're not, they're still hand wired. You can still convert them to most stuff pretty easily,
Yeah. My dad has an old Silverface Super. That's wicked. Super wicked.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they can be good, man. I mean, I'm always on the lookout for a 70s deluxe reverb because I want to take it to Paul Rivera and have him do the studio, treatment that he did to all those 70s deluxes that were on all the Michael Jackson records and all the Toto records in the early days, because those were all his modded Fender deluxes that were all kind of 70s deluxes that nobody really liked or cared about, and he made them cool.
I don't think I knew anything about that. That's new to me.
You know Rivera amplification. You're familiar with it, yeah. So like he was the guy that would do all like the repairs and stuff like that out of Valley Arts, and Valley Arts was like a studio, like a lesson studio, and they had a retail side, and they also were kind of the first in LA that were really doing custom guitars on any sort of like big level. So all the studio guys had these sort of like hot rodded Strats that originally that's what they were doing. They were just taking Strats, converting them to Floyds and EMGs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then they started doing their own guitars, which were basically like Strats with, EMGs and Floyds, and had their own headstock.
Was that not what Brent Mason's Telly? Was it not a Valley Arts?
It was, but that was after they had kind of like sold the company to Samick and then Gibson, and so it had gotten reabsorbed a few times and changed hands. But Valley Arts was kind of Valley Arts original until about 89 or so, or maybe early 90s, and then they had this fire in their showroom, and they were never able to sort of recover fully from that. But I think that there was also some compounding things with the Floyd Roses and stuff like that were kind of falling out of fashion, and the kind of the tide of all different types of guitars and things like that were just changing. Like the music of the 90s and the grunge and in that sort of in the Seattle sound. Like those guys weren't using Floyd Rose. It was like a way more organic, kind of sound. And so I think that maybe there were more factors at play than simply just that their place burned down and it was hard to recover. I think also like the style of guitar that they were making and the way that music was going was not in alignment with that anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that played a part in it. But getting back to Paul Rivera, as he was their repair and amp guy on the electronic side there. And so all the studio guys, the Lukethers and Michael Landau and Paul Jackson Jr. and Dean Parks and all the guys in the scene were all taking their stuff to them to get repaired. And he would do these mods to give them basically a channel switching studio amp before Mesa Boogie was even around, because Mesa Boogie was kind of the first boutique, kind of amplifier.
Yeah.
That was kind of doing channel switching. And he was doing it to these Fenders way before that, And so they're really iconic amps. And if you can find them, they're like, maybe 20 grand or something like that.
Oh.
But yeah, but
I was going to say, if you find one, let me know. If you find a pair of them, let me know. Never mind.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he did a run of reissues, though, based on taking the reissue deluxe version of that Princeton that you got and would convert it over to his, what he called, I think it was a Stage 4 mod. And he sold them through Sweetwater, and they sold out like instantly. And then Fender, I guess, wouldn't allow him to remake them because they didn't want to risk any like lawsuit of him modifying their existing amplifier. So he's now recreated a Rivera version, which is all Rivera parts, but looks like, it's the closest any of his amps have looked like to a Fender since those days. And it's an exact replica of it, all hand-wired, super high quality. I mean, like his amps are so overbuilt and sound really good. And I think he kind of got typecast as like a metal amp because when they kind of, when he separated, because he went to work for Fender after he worked for Valley Arts, and ran their amp company or the amp side of the company from the kind of the 80s through about the 90s, and then created Rivera amplification from there. And at that point, they were kind of getting more of like the, Deftones and Korn and like kind of these more like metal and new metal type guys. And so they really got typecasted as that. But even though his whole body of work up to that point was really like not that at all. It was like more of the fusion-y Jay Gradens and, Totos and stuff like that.
Yeah, right.
And so I think it's sort of been a hard typecast to shake. It's like once your cast is like Batman, you're you're Batman,
Yeah.
And even though, you might have done all these different roles, where you won Academy Awards or whatever, it's like, nope. Christian Bale is still Batman, and Paul Rivera is still, making the metal amps that have the diamond pattern, like metal engraving on them, and that's the challenge. But man, if you can find, I mean, I'm frankly, I want to buy one of the new Stage 4s because they're small, they're compact, they're lower wattage. I think they're 22 watts like a deluxe is. And so it's basically a hand-wired deluxe with his mods and channel switching and all the effects loop treatment. So it has the right buffering and all that stuff for the loop. And they're great.
Well, yeah, I just looked it up and it looks like a slightly squared off deluxe.
Yeah. And they're, I'm telling you, they are crazy well built, and he's such an underrated guy. He was even doing like all like the pedalboard and rack rigs before Bradshaw. Like he was like the Bradshaw of like this late 70s and early 80s before kind of Robert Bradshaw kind of took over that because Paul Rivera had gone to Fender.
Right.
So he wasn't involved anymore, but he was the first guy that made a commercial buffer pedal and was making sort of like these primitive true bypass loopers at the time, and making power supplies for pedal boards, and he was kind of like the first guy to do any of that stuff commercially. Yeah. So
wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, he was kind of like the godfather of kind of that scene, pedal board and amp scene. But yeah, a lot of people don't know that side of the story. They just know that he was kind of at Fender and then, did all the metal guys' amps.
Right. Interesting. Wild.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Well,
so check him out. Yeah, he's really an interesting guy. His son runs the company mostly now. He's probably my parents' age, maybe a little older. He's probably in his 70s.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's got to be sort of late 60s, early 70s, but
Yeah,
Crazy.
but they're really, really great stuff and highly recommended. But yeah, man, that was super cool. I loved hearing about the guitars, the amps, the pedals, and I'm glad that the Dynamic Distortion has made a reprisal selfishly.
Oh yeah,
And
no man, it's great. I mean, knowing that you might not make them, I might have to pick up a one or two more of those things before they go the way of the dough.
I think you can get them. I think you can get them cheap. You know, it's like when it's like when I asked my friend who's an author, or I was with my friend who's an author, and he wrote kind of like some books that didn't do that well, and somebody had asked him, that met him, they're like, oh yeah, what's that? What's the title of your book? And he's like, oh, in most places it's 50% off is the title. And I think that's how it is for the Dynamic Distortion.
Oh, what a shame!
50% off,
man.
Because I think you can get them for about $100 on Reverb.
Oh, no kidding. Well,
yeah.
Then I know where I'm going. We should do if they become popular again, we should do a limited edition of them where they have like a 50% off, like star-shaped logo screen printed onto them.
Yeah, and then it'll have a Joey Landreth. It'll just have a silhouette of your beard.
Yeah. Just from the bottom jaw down. Oh no, I think I lost you. Oh no,
you're right. Yeah.
Cool, man.
Yeah. I think that there's potential, or moving it into a smaller box and trying to do some things to it to make it more palatable to the average consumer that walks into a guitar store and puts everything up straight up at noon.
You could just rotate the pots so that the sweet spot
it just keeps on going past. Yeah,
it's like, wow, this is really weird, but
it doesn't go back from noon. It only goes forward.
When I tried the first prototype of the Golden Boy, I was talking with Brad Jackson and I plugged it in and was like, this sounds really good, but it's definitely brighter than I was expecting it to be. And he was like, yeah. Did you try turning down the treble knob? And I was like, no. He was like, well, why? Like, yeah, that's a good question because I just really want it to be straight up and down, if I'm completely honest with you.
Yeah. There's some weird psychology about this.
100%.
Now, and I'm going to leave that to a Canadian, psychologist to do that. So if you know any good ones over there at what's the big college that everybody, all the smart people go to in Canada? I forget the name.
McGill, maybe.
Yeah.
McGill's one of them. There's a few, but probably McGill. Yeah, I don't know. I definitely know a few psychologists, so we'll figure it out. We'll do a clinical.
Yeah, if any of them want to do a pedal longitudinal study, I'm sure there's going to be people just clamoring for that.
Huge market for this.
Yeah. So they want that do like a doctoral thesis that's really going to sort of fossilize them on the Mount Rushmore of psychologists.
That's right. Yeah,
this is going to be the one.
Guitar players really, the sort of theme is guitar players just want things to be straight up and down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that if Sigmund Freud were still around, he would certainly be interested.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I think the conclusion is just maybe my IQ is slightly lower than it ought to be.
Yeah. You and me both then. If that's where we are. If that's our baseline. But,
that's our marker. Yeah, fair enough.
Well, on that note, thank you, Joey, again for your time and for indulging my questions about gear. And thanks again for the shout out on the Dynamic Distortion. Hopefully, you'll go from $99.99 on Reverb to an even 100.
Hey, we'll try and move that dial. Thanks so much for having me, man. It was great to catch up.
All right. Bye-bye.
Later, dude.
So that was Joey Landreth, certainly one of the best guitar players and one of my favorite guitar players of my generation. Great slide player, great singer. Loved the Brothers Landreth albums, and really glad that he kind of imparted some of his insight and knowledge and understanding of effects, ordering effects, his kind of core sounds with the Klon, the blues breaker, the fuzz, his couple of key guitars that he uses, and then also the amplifiers. It was really nice to kind of hear all of that, the story behind some of it, and then what his picks are. All really great stuff. Again, I want to give a shout out to all of our sponsors, Blue Microphones, True Tone, Diodario, and of course Vertex Effects for all making this happen. I also want to thank all the people behind the scenes, Hunter Harrison for editing and mixing, Mason Mejia for co-producing, and Tim Marco for all of the music. And of course, thank you to Joey Landreth for being a part of the podcast. Until next time, I'm Mason Marangella, the Rig Doctor. I'll see you later.